Rising family, welcome to another edition of the Voodoo Quantum Universe by Dr. Reginald Crosley. I am your reader, Ahmad Brown, aka Pharaoh Brown, and for today's session, we will be reading through The Crisis of Possession or Channeling. In this particular section, Dr. Crosley begins to unpack the phenomenon of interdimensional or otherworldly possession as understood and experienced through the Voodoo practice. As many may understand, there is a negative connotation when it comes to possession. In many instances, we only know the Hollywood interpretation thereof when it comes to some type of evil demonic force. However, the concept of possession is quite common, and it is also something that is regularly witnessed in a similar fashion in the Christian Protestant tradition, where people actually give themselves over to the speaking in tongues for all genuine purposes or all genuine experiences as recorded. The same similar possession activity does take right in religious settings where people generally attribute them to the forces of quote-unquote goodness. So essentially, just as a introductory example here, we do see that possession is something that is a little more profound and a little more universal than it has been codified in our modern era as something strictly black and white or good and or bad. And so Dr. Crosley in this chapter begins to unpack these notions, and from here we will begin to have a more scientific or a more educational look at the concept of possession. And we shall begin. The possession phenomenon is central in understanding the alternate reality of the Vodouns and their composite state with the devotees. The Cartesian or logical approach of the Western world in facing the singularities of shadow matter entities and avoiding a medieval terminology uses expressions such as materialized psychisms or weightless thought or imaginal realm and the psychoid phenomena. Carl Jung, the eminent Swiss psychiatrist philosopher, incorporated this phenomenon into his archetypes, the products of collective unconscious, and he sees them as visionary rumors or the order of religious visions. Jacques Vallée, author of Passport to Magonia, a casebook of alien contact written in 1988, recognized those psychoid phenomenon are not extraterrestrials and uses the euphemism of denizens of another reality by Fred Alan Wolf, the author of Taking the Quantum Leap. And so he uses the term imaginal realm and recognizes that psychoid phenomena exhibit a partial and temporal physical manifestation that does not fit the classical pattern, but rather that of the quantum physics. The great discovery of Sigmund Freud, the unconscious has become the new myth of the 20th century. We found exaggeration in its application, similar to that of the ancients who explained all good or bad things by the works of spirits. However, it is imperative that we keep the unconscious in its proper place in order to recognize the other dimensions of reality. The eminent Haitian psychiatrist, historian, and sociologist J.D. Dorsanaville in Voodoo et Nervos, published in 1931 at Port-au-Prince, Haiti, expounded the Freudian concept of the unconscious and presented voodoo as a psychoneurosis. This is an important work. It is the first attempt to demonstrate that the voodoo phenomenon is not supernatural, but rather an expression of a hereditary nervous system disturbance that facilitates aberrant behavior. According to Dorsanaville, in essence, voodooism is a mental disorder, a religious, racial, hereditary psychosis, manifested as split personality or multiple personalities with heightened sensory and motor capabilities, coupled with a prophetic ability as well. In so doing, the author wants to discard the idea of other dimensions in reality. He is trying to reduce the whole universe to the psychochemical representations of the classical system. This is an a priori elimination of alternate realities, parallel universes, and the existence of a divine world. What makes him very comfortable in approaching the unexplained and eerie phenomenon of the universe, that is, a scientific attitude that scrutinizes everything, with faith in the ability of human minds to unravel the secrets of nature. Dorseneville realizes his hypothesis is only an approximation, and he expects advances in the physical science to bring more light to our everyday reality. Like the author in the book of Genesis, this physician firmly believes that we are dust into dust and we shall return. There's nothing beyond nature. However, modern science has shown us that dust is not as simple as we would like to see it. Dust has a dual nature. It is particle and wave. Many of the uncanny, eerie phenomena of nature fall into the realm of wave function and into the world, that weird form of matter called dark matter and shadow matter or invisible matter. When Dorseneville wrote his thesis on Voodoo in 1931, the tenets of quantum physics were not as popular as they are today. He did not mention anything about quantum mechanics. Bohr, Einstein, Heisenberg, and Schrödinger were all arguing about the implications of quantum principles and paradoxes. Freud's theory of subconscious self was the fashion of the day, and the temptation to study Voodoo in the light of Freudian concepts was very powerful and logical. However, Dorseneville goes further than Freud in his approach to the crisis of possession. The crisis is more than a functional, dynamic disturbance. It is a genetic, hereditary nervous system disease. Additionally, it is an aberration of the nervous system that affects people of African descent. It can be atavic at times, that is, skipping 1 or 2 generations, or that it can be directly transmitted from parents to children. This hypothesis does not fit the gestalt because the phenomenon is non-existing in African Americans in the United States or Canada who share the same genes with the African Haitians. Also, the phenomenon occurs in Caucasian individuals introduced to the cultural background of the Vodouns or the alternate reality of Haiti, Cuba, Brazil, and the like. It has been observed in Paris among Caucasian French assisting Vodou ceremonies in a Haitian club. And it is also a fact that not all individuals in a family of Vodous or Vodouists are affected by the phenomenon to the same extent. Some individuals never get possessed. Others are simply made dizzy by the encounter, while others are repeatedly mounted by the lower and Vodou. Dorseneville asked himself why there was no Vodou possession of the Black American ethnicity. His answer was that the phenomenon assumes a different expression because neurosis takes many shapes. However, from a clinical standpoint, the signs and symptoms of a Vodou possession are distinctively characteristic of a phenomenon itself and cannot be confused with disease of ordinary psychiatry. In establishing his hypothesis, Dorseneville also comes up with an enlightened definition of neurosis that includes epilepsy, grand mal seizure, pétamal, hysteria, and intellectually gifted and genius. It is very far-fetched. Contemporary classification of psychiatric illnesses does not include all cases of seizure, disorders, and all individuals with very high IQ or the gifted ones. It is really going too far to speak of racial neurosis or racial psychoneurosis. It is also a fact that medicine in this last part of the 20th century has revealed to us a genetic or organic nature of some conditions that we used to see purely as functional, such as homosexuality. It is still debatable, although researchers have claimed the isolation of such a gene. Regrettably, the champions of eugenics use the concept of racial psychoneurosis to perpetuate ethnic cleansing, Holocaust, and genocide. At any rate, in order to obtain objectivity of science, we must keep an open mind and seek the interplay of nature and nurture. The crisis of possession in adorcism, as manifested in blacks and whites, suggested the existence of a biological predisposition. Which of that is of the medium? A medium is a person who is endowed with psychic ability, either spontaneously or by training through yoga techniques or transcendental meditation. The teachings of the Eastern religions convey the idea that everyone has psychic abilities that could be heightened or developed with proper methods and spiritual enlightenment. In all cultures, nations, tribes, and families, women show greater psychic abilities than men. We all know the proverbial sixth sense of the woman. In antiquity, women played an important role in religion as seers and prophetesses. In Latin, Sibyl, the Egyptian prophetess at Thebes in Memphis, and the Vestales of ancient Rome are all hallmarks of their clairvoyant abilities. In Haiti, more women are Honsu Kanzo, that is, the wife of the Loa, or Vodou. In that alternate reality, the man can also be a wife or a spouse of an entity. Official marriage and wedding ceremonies are performed for the Loa and adepts, with contracts written on the model of the legal ones. In Haiti, there are many Mambo priestesses or Hongun priests. Dorsaneville has called attention to some similarities between the Voodoo crisis of possession and the symptoms of somnambulism, hysteria, and hypnotism. Like all physicians know, many signs and symptoms are shared by different disease entities. Fever and chills are present in infectious disease, metabolic disease, physical trauma, and cancers. Not all chest pain means a heart attack, and not all headaches mean a brain tumor. Not all skinny bodies mean tuberculosis or anorexia or AIDS. Every case presented to the doctor, he must proceed to a differential diagnosis to separate the look-alike in clinical presentations. Somnambulism, or sleepwalking, is a condition during which a partly awakened sleeper performs various physical activities. Most of the individuals affected sit up in bed or stand near the bed. Some walk around and have very few accomplish more complicated actions. Sleepwalking is more commonly seen in children than adults. An individual is more likely to sleepwalk during periods of tension or worry. After awakening, most sleepwalkers do not recall their activities. A sleepwalker can injure himself or herself by falling out of a window or down the stairs, or by walking into obstacles, fire, or water. So it is important for people around them to awaken them and protect them. During the crisis of possession, the adept or the Hunzi behaves in a in a sleepwalking-like manner, and must be assisted at the induction of the possession by the devotees. There is a lot of similarity between the composite state of the possession and the dream state, and we will see that in greater detail. Dorsaneville shared the opinion of other contemporaries on the matter, such as Professor Osterich of the University of Tübingen. And there he stated from the physiological standpoint, naturally occurring or provoked sleepwalkers present numerous analogies to the Vodou possession. In either case, the subconscious takes over automatically. The conscious self becomes dull, forgetful, and the individual executes well-coordinated movements without any voluntary control. However, Osterich speaks on the rang, or the constraining character, of the possession phenomenon that could help in the differential diagnosis of the two conditions. Dorsaneville also equates the crisis of possession to a form of hypnosis that can be as provoked sleepwalking. In antiquity, hypnosis was related to ecstasy and hallucinations people experienced during religious ceremonies. Individuals in hypnotic trance were believed to have extraordinary powers that came from the gods. In ancient Egypt, the priest could induce a state similar to hypnosis in a ceremony called temple sleep. With the influence of Christianity, people came to believe that under hypnosis the individual was controlled by the devil. Thus, the practice was associated with witchcraft and black magic. However, in the late 1700s, some scholars began to look at the phenomenon in another way. The concept of a magnetic fluid released by the sun and stars that pervades all things on Earth led scholars to think that anything that interferes with the normal flow of that fluid would induce diseases. That concept was exploited by Franz Mesmer, an Austrian physician who studied medicine in Vienna and practiced in Paris in 1778. He believed that the mysterious fluid that penetrates the body can be handled in such a way that it allows a person to have a powerful magnetic influence over another person. Mesmer called this fluid animal magnetism, and claimed that with the use of magnetic wands, The fluid could be directed at will, and the sick could be made healthy. Mesmer's followers were named mesmerists, or magnetizers, and his sessions or seances created a sensation in Paris. In 1784, the Academy of Sciences and the Faculty of Medicine in Paris demanded an investigation of his practice. The commission included Antoine Le Sauvier, a famous French chemist, and Benjamin Franklin, the United States ambassador to Paris at the time. The investigative body reported there was no such thing as a magnetic fluid. However, it recommended that hypnotism be practiced by qualified persons or physicians. In that same year, Marquis de Puysegur, one of Mesmer's students, discovered the secret of hypnotic trance. James Braid, an English medical writer, conducted an organized investigation in hypnotism and pointed out that the trance state differed from natural sleep and suggested the possible existence of a double consciousness in individuals. That can be considered as a forerunner for the subconscious exploited later by Sigmund Freud. It also reminded us of the African Semedo, or our modern axionic clone. Jean-Martin Charot established in Paris a clinic for nervous disorders at the Salpêtrière. Among his students were Alfred Binet and Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud's initial studies of the unconscious were done on hypnotized students. He is the first to map the double consciousness or the subconscious world of the human mind. He taught that memory stored in the subconscious mind influence a person's mental life. Psychoanalysis brings those memories into consciousness. He felt dreams were a major key to the subconscious mind. He listed three main forces in a person's life: the id, an instructive force; the ego, an executive force that contacts the world of reality; and the superego, or the superior disciplinary force. His theory of exploring the subconscious has been applied to art and surrealist painting, and to the literature of the stream of consciousness style of writing. Babies are born with the id, as well as the genetic, physical predisposition of the human species, a genetic information network or instincts. It is part of the quantum Semedo complex. As the child grows and his or her nervous system matures, they apprehend the world more fully and develop their ego and superego through the information processing network of the visible and invisible body components. Andre Breton, in his exploration of the subconscious, has come to realize the presence of what he called the Great Transparence. His visit to Haiti in 1945 could have helped the development of that concept. The manifestation of the Great Transparence in the humophore is a repeatable experience on a daily basis, like in a laboratory setting. While Breton opted for the existence of the shadow matter entities as separate forces that can modulate our own shadow component, Dorseneville discarded such a notion and presented the crisis of possession as a hereditary mental disorder, manifested as hysteria, somnambulism, or sleepwalking, and hypnosis. The unusual physical manifestations of possession are attributed to the heightened power of the subconscious mind. It is like the disease itself enhances the energy of the information processing network and translate waves function into tangible psychic or physical power, like the actualization of Einstein's equation E equals mc squared. The disease state creates a setting where energy is transformed into matter. It is a fact that under hypnosis, a new personality can be introduced into the subject by the magnetizer or the hypnoist. How is this possible? This is more than power of suggestion, as the latter is directed at the conscious self. In hypnosis, the shadow matter component moves on the surface or forefront and takes command of the individual's nervous system. Like the dream states, the limitations of space-time do not exist. In dreams, the boundary constraints of ordinary reality are overrun by ubiquity, transmutation, metamorphosis, instantaneous propagation, teletransportation, levitation, contraction, or expansion of the mind or of space-time, telepathy, precognition, and retrocognition. Experience has shown that under hypnosis, the shadow matter self remained under the command of the hypnoist. People once thought that individuals under hypnosis could not commit undesirable acts, but researchers proved that hypnotized persons will perform antisocial and even self-destructive acts. Some persons are capable of hypnotizing themselves. Under hypnosis, an individual may see, hear, touch, or feel things that are not present. He may not be able to see persons or objects that are in plain view. He may feel insects crawling over his skin and start scratching or try to brush them away. This reveals to us how the quantum dimension works. All sensation perception categories are apprehended or become conscious after transformation to energy, electromagnetic field, or other. These space-time events are stored in the visible and invisible matter components. They can be retrieved to produce hallucinations, dreams, and actual physical events such as vasomotor changes, sweating, blushing, burns, anesthesia, paralysis, single muscle rigidity, or a new personality. Musicians under hypnosis can create compositions in the matter of Chopin or Debussy, for example, if they are told that they are those composers. However, they are boundary constraints to those actualizations. We never try to place a hypnotized subject into a gas chamber or a crematory to see if he will come out alive. We never try to open fire on him with a machine gun or to use him as a suicide bomber that will come out without a scratch. We never impale them with a spear or a sword. We never push them over a cliff or a chasm below to see them climb up with a smile. We never ask them to drink poison or chew glass without harm. We never ask them to transmute literally into a panther, a lion, a cobra, or to become totally invisible. We never suggest to them to literally fly like Superman through the sky, or to move objects from a distance using telekinesis. Did anybody ever try to ask an amputee under hypnosis to run a marathon or participate in the Olympics? Of course not. We know better. We don't fool around with such nonsense. However, those suggestions are not nonsensical in the alternate reality of the Vodouns. We will see that later on in greater detail. Dorseneville depicts the manifestations of possession as a functional disturbance to the mind called hysteria. In psychiatry, hysteria is the result of unconscious conflict between the thoughts and emotions that a person is not aware of. The critical period of the onset of possession is puberty or between the ages of 10 to 16. However, possession has been observed in children 6 or 8 years old. The possession presents itself as hysteria manifested like a minor form of epilepsy, an incomplete symptomology described by the parents as being brushed by the lower. According to Dorseneville, when the subconscious takes over, it liberates within us forces that are stronger than ordinary forces. They are universal or cosmic. However, I would like to pinpoint a problem with the latter statement. Here, the psychiatrist is not presenting the subconscious as an ordinary function of the nervous system or a simple result of the physiochemical and energetic actions and reactions. He brings in a new concept, a universal force that medicine does not consider in developing the functional and anatomic manifestations of diseases. That universal force belongs to the Eastern philosophies or alternate reality of the Vodou. Thus, neurosis or Vodou hysteria is the state issued from the liberation of the subconscious self when then appears with all its strength and manifests in the split personality or multiple personalities. It is a crisis of possession by the individual by his subconscious self. The psychiatrist recognizes the existence of eerie phenomena in Vodou possession, but he explains them by the strong emotivity that unleashes forces that are more intense than that of ordinary physiology. For him, this is an abnormal state that allows the manifestation of unknown psychic properties of the mind or for its wave function. There is nothing alien in possession, no surviving soul or lower as a separate entity. Furthermore, Dorseneville presents the cosmic force as external forces of the universe that are at play in all vital manifestations. It is not far from animism or vitalism. In fact, he is following the opinion of Dr. Laboure, who thinks that thought, mind, life, and intelligence are expressions of universal forces, and he equates them to the electromagnetic forces and light. From a clinical standpoint, D'Ursonville gives us a description of Vodou possession that is to remain classic. He uses the model of Professor Osterich in the University of Tübingen, who describes 3 types of changes when the body of an individual is overtaken by a foreign entity. There are a new face, a new voice, a new personality. D'Ursonville describes 4 elements: a split in personality, the Vodou mask or change of face, voice alteration, and a new personality. The possessed speaks of himself in the third person. It is the entity that speaks through him. The syndrome suggests the presence of an alien personality or a succession of different personalities, like there are 3 faces of Eve, each one in its body, build, and constitution. Helen Smith, the case described by Professor Osterich, was incarnating Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, and Castiglione, the magician of the 18th century. D'Ursonville establishes a parallelism between the onset of hysteria and that of adorcism. In both, we have seizure-like manifestations. Hysterical seizures can usually be distinguished from genuine seizures in the fact that the hysterical patients rarely injure themselves, bite their tongues, or lose their urine. They do not have the typical spastic phase and then the alternating contraction and the relaxation phase of a seizure, but tend to show a dramatic flailing of the limbs. Consciousness is partially retained, and seizures hardly ever occur when the patient is alone. The EEG is normal. Other motor disturbances described in hysteria include abnormal movements, disturbed gaits, and paralysis. There are also sensatory disturbances, particularly blindness and deafness, developing dramatically at times of emotional distress. Loss of sensation over one side of the body is often described by the patient. The sensory losses do not conform to patterns of nerve distribution. The reflexes remain intact or unchanged in paralysis of the limbs. Convulsion of the entire body does not disturb consciousness. Blindness occurs without disturbance of pupillary reflexes or rapid oscillation of the eyeballs. The mute can phonate by coughing. The deaf speaks louder than to be heard in noisy surroundings. It is very important to note that in the classical textbook descriptions of hysteria, we do not have the eerie phenomena associated with possession. By definition, hysteria is a disturbance of behavior in which symptoms and signs of diseases are reproduced more or less unconsciously for some personal advantage. In that case, hysteria can be hard to distinguish from malingering. But the authentic malingerer, the pathological liar of the Munchausen syndrome, goes beyond hysteria in self-humiliating or self-mutilating behavior. Thus, the physician or the researcher is always confronted with the difficult and differential diagnosis. There exist certain medical conditions that are notoriously easily confused with hysteria because of the subtle clinical presentations, such as the first attack of multiple sclerosis, the weakness of the limbs in early phase of acute idiopathic polyneurosis, of Guillain-Barré syndrome, the swallowing difficulty of myasthenia gravis, the muscular weakness of periodic paralysis, the spastic posture in eyes movements of post-encephalic Parkinsonism, the pain in spinal cord tumor, or the abdominal pain of acute intermittent porphyria. Thanks to D'Ursonville's clinical acumen, we can add the Vodou crisis of possession to the list. However, for us, in this latter part of the 20th century, the two conditions are not identical. They exist only some resemblances and analogies between them. There are more similarities between Vodou possession and the somnambulism or sleepwalking in hypnosis. In those conditions, the interplay between our nervous system and that of our shadow matter component or an alien entity seem to be identical. The eminent Haitian psychiatrist described in the onset of possession as an epileptic-like seizure, but without spastic phase. He sees only the cyclic phase of flailing movements. In true epilepsy, the movements are not disorganized or erratic. Thus, the flailing reminds him of hysteria. However, he could have missed a tonic phase, the state of rigidity or impassivity, when the body of the individual is suddenly invaded and subjugated by an external force. The seizure-like phase observed by the physician is the result of a struggle between the individual's nervous system and the invading force. This is called a Bossal reaction by the Vodou initiates and testifies of the ill preparation or ignorance of the mounted adept. An individual who has received proper initiation through the La Verité or by a Honsi console, education does not put up a struggle or resistance to the shadow matter entity. However, a seizure-like event can take place in the Honsu console when he or she is mounted by the brutal Loa or Petro pantheon of the Xandor group. Thus, in ordinary circumstances with a well-trained adept, the crisis of possession occurs in a smooth fashion. Furthermore, a true grand mal seizure may occur in the composite state of channeling when the dark matter entity penetrates forcefully the nervous system of the individual and elicits abnormal electrical current to the brain. Osterich and Dorseneville describe a new face of the possessed or dramatic change in the person's features. Dorseneville called it the Vodou mask. In the individual's face assumes new contours and expressions, such as that as a panther. In Agasu's case, a snake for the Dambala, or that of a dead person in the case of Vivi. At times, not only the face changes, but the whole person in the case of the old and decrepit Legba, the Quetish, Yzerli Frida, the sleazy Gede Zarinen, and the hierarchic Baron Samadi of the bellicose Ogu Frial, or the Emperor Dessalines. Dorseneville has witnessed a Dambala possession that mimics the motion of a snake. A young woman possessed by the Vodou climbed a tree with the agility of a snake, moved from branch to branch without any hindrance, and stayed there for 2 days without any food. In the case of possession by a child Loa, the adult behaves like a child in Dorseneville's estimation, and these feats cannot be faked. As mentioned earlier, he attributes to the subconscious a physical or energetic power that in which ordinary circumstances are contained or restrained, such as a nuclear power is restrained to the atom. To unleash the nuclear power of the force of the subconscious, unusual events or circumstances must take place. In the case of Vodou or hysteria, eerie phenomena are produced when a strong emotivity unleashes forces that are more intense than that of ordinary physiology. However, true hysteria is more of a mimicry than abnormal physiology. In possession, we are dealing with other aspects of the physical world that we call alternate realities. The story of the Spanish ambassador's butler, reported by Dorseneville, is a case in point. A feeble illness opened up his subconscious programming in which a manner that he repeated for word all conversations heard during that time. That makes him a perfect spy. However, when he got rid of the fever, he lost the ability to reconnect the conversations. Likewise, in Vodou composite state of Adorkism, young people began to speak in African dialects they did not learn in Haiti. So far, the phenomenon can be seen as functional disturbances. However, Dorseneville went further to assess the event as an expression of hereditary or atavism. He wrongly assumed that the dialect is an expression of the genes. During the crisis of possession, the Loa reenact the customs of their African tribal culture. A Congo Voodoo exhibits the exuberance of the Congo culture. Likewise, for the caloric or fiery Arata, the rebellious Igbo, and the cruel Congo. To us, these manifestations are more the result of a composite state than that of atavism. They express the existence of an alien Semito, an axionic entity, which is like the information diskette that takes over, overrides, and modulates the complex psychic world of the adept. The breakdown in personality structure described by Dorseneville in his Freudian approach does occur. He states that the possession occurs because of lack of strong cohesion in the ego, allowing the subconscious to produce a new personality. The psychiatrist thinks that social evolution, education, and lofty ethics will preclude the occurrence of possession and its neurosis. Haitian realities prove the contrary. The educated and the well-to-do elite belong to that 95% of the population that believe in the forces of Voodoo alternate realities, and many of them are practicing Voodooists. The breakdown in personality structure occurs not because of a lack of education, but because of an invasion perpetrated by an alien axionic entity. In the Voodoo et Nervos, Dorseneville describes the hesitations in speech at the onset of the crisis, stuttering, deep inspirations or aspirations that testify the difficulty in controlling the body somato-salato complex of the individual. But when the invader is in full control, eerie phenomenon begin to happen without hindrance. The new physiology is apparent. The sense perceptions are modulated to higher power. Olfactory materialization are manifested as the audience can smell unusual odors or sudden bad breath. The possessed can handle incandescent iron bars or fiery red charcoal, walk with naked feet on brazen furnace, chew pieces of glass without pain or bleeding, apply hot pepper or hot sauce to the eyes or the genitals. The motor functions go beyond ordinary physiology. Muscular strength increases. There's an exaggeration or a flexion, an extension, lateral bending, and contortions, such as 180-degree turns of the head so that the face is looking from the back of the body. It is a familiar scene in Haiti when under possession a young child, perhaps an 8-year-old girl, cannot be subdued by 4 or 5 strong men. Dorseneville also reported the dance of the Asuga in Alger, where amazing feats are performed. Eyes come out of their sockets down to the cheeks. The possessed pierce their own eyes with fine and long needles, open their belly with their weapons, exposing their viscera and intestine. In Haiti, an old woman with a sprained ankle, who was unable to amputate without a cane, who was unable to ambulate without a cane, suddenly when mounted by the loa, began to dance like a 20-year-old girl. She performed like that throughout the whole night. The possessed can levitate, if only for a few inches above the ground, but the higher up, like that to the top of a tree. A Nigerian patient of mine has reported a similar case seen in his village back home in Africa. Cases of teletransportation are reported in Haiti. With that of handkerchiefs spread over the sea or a river, Agoes devotees claim to have been transported back to Africa. Nanguin. Mrs. M.S., a young married woman from Haiti who lives in Washington, D.C., reports that at the age of 16, when she was possessed by the somatic entity of a dead person, the treatment consisted of flagellation, along with many other things. Her mother, who was assisting the event, could not stand the sight, but MS did not feel any of the whipping. Her ordeal began when she rejected the advances of a young man who reported the incident to his mother, who decided to destroy the teenage girl the old-fashioned way. Dispelling a coughing spirit on her, MS began to waste away like a typical case of tuberculosis in Haiti. She was seen by a renowned pulmonary specialist in Port-au-Prince, who, upon examining the first set of x-rays of the lungs, was surprised to see the extent of disease. Both lung fields were destroyed by cavitary lesions in a relatively short time. He repeated the x-ray to make sure that they belonged to the young patient. He saw the same findings. He then referred her to the sanatorium of Port-au-Prince. At the sanatorium, the TB specialist repeated the x-rays, but this time they had a different picture. Both lungs were clear. There was no radiographic evidence of tuberculosis, and in fact, sets of x-rays of the somatic entity had entered into strong interaction with the typarture nature of the patient and produced the physical evidence of lung disease by detection of x-ray. In the sanitarium set of films, the Semitic entity was in its ordinary WIMP state. The girl was returned to her parents, who thus sought help of the homegoing. Dorseneville also mentions his work in the case of Pythatism, or prophetism. The person in composite state with the loa is capable of telling the future, or revealing hidden secrets, or revealing the past, and being the portent of good omen or bad outcome. Clinical hysteria, in its classical presentation, cannot manifest such paranormal feats, considering that the Freudian subconscious is only one aspect of the world of psychonomics. Many other psychiatrists, nurtured in the alternate reality of Haiti, reject Dorseneville's hypothesis. Dr. Lampere Duyon, in his phenomenologic study of the crisis of possession, concluded that it is not a pathological condition. According to Dr. Janine Philippe, the spirits of the dead and magical spells are so often considered by the Haitians to explain all illnesses that it becomes imperative to pay attention to their mentality in the etiology of mental disorders. Certain aspects of their alternate reality create a state of anxiety that can lead to psychosis in predisposed individuals. Furthermore, the energetics of the loa, or the pressing needs of the dead, constitute a tyranny on the adept. There are so many taboos and interdictions that the devotee spends a large part of his time in performing rituals to protect himself and his family. Dr. Legrand-Biou rejects Dorseneville's hypothesis that the crisis of possession is a pathological phenomenon. Also, physicians like John Price Mars, Louis Mars, and Louis Maximilian have seen in adorcism or possession a cultural phenomenon that in the cultural context has nothing of a pathological nature. John Price Mars dwells mainly in the mystical aspect of Voodoo. Louis Mars stresses the social, gregarious, and frenzied aspect of the crisis, while Louis Maximilian considers the psychological impact of the ambiance and the physiological changes brought about by alcohol or other psychedelic beverages on the suggestibility of the Vodouist. Dr. Legrand-Bigot questioned, however, the supernatural explanation of the crisis of possession and its psychotromic feats such as fire manipulation, glass chewing, and the increase in physical strength, endurance, or clairvoyance. He hopes that there is a scientific explanation for all of this. He leans toward suggestion or autosuggestion as the mechanism at work, but the method of procedure remains a mystery. He senses that there must be a natural explanation coming from the natural sciences. We are in the same quandary when we must explain the transformations of the master force into electromagnetic waves, radio wave, infrared, X-ray, intra-atomic strong force, weak force, axion of dark matter, and the fermions and bosons of visible matter. For us in the latter part of the 20th century, quantum physics and the supersymmetry theory, the string field theory, place us closer to a natural explanation by revealing the wondrous or marvelous aspects of our space-time. What we use to label supernatural or spiritual belong to the physical world of supersymmetric universe or hyperspace. In rejecting Dorseneville's hypothesis of that hysteria, we do not negate his thesis as a whole, as the analogies between adorcism and sleepwalking or hypnosis are as valid observations. Those three phenomena have a common infrastructure, which is that of sleep. In sleep, there is a reversal in dominance between the tripart components of man, between the body, the semedo, and the solido. In other words, there is a change of position between the visible physical body, the shadow matter physical body, and the axionic clone. In ordinary waking state, the visible body is on top and takes precedence in dealing with the environment through the information processing network. In sleep state, the clone moves on top and takes control. As the individual's ordinary consciousness retreats to the background or slumps under the surface for normal spatial temporal relation to the external world, the shadow matter component moves to the fore and begins its own interactions, either within itself or with the other components of the individual or with the external world. In sleep induction, the heaviness of the eyelids correspond to the subjugation of the body and its IPN by the axionic double. In the first place, known as a slow wave sleep, the IPN activity of the visible body is reflected in the graduated slowing of EEG rhythms, with tall amplitude and synchronization through 4 stages, from mild drowsiness to profound somnolence, or profound sleep. Some dreams may occur during that phase, but they are all dull and prosaic, and they are related to the individual's daily activities. That stage lasts 90 to 100 minutes. There is the release of some chemical in the brain to allow this reversal in spatial temporal plane of existence, the passage from a parallel universe to the next. Serotonin, released from the neurons of the raphe nuclei, induces SW sleep and primes the second state of dream, or REM. This may be related to a daily cyclic rhythm of wakefulness and sleepiness. The second state of sleep, or REM state, is characterized by EEG, low voltage amplitude, fast and desynchronized waves, and is associated with profound relaxation of the skeletal muscles, the absent reflexes, abrupt changes in respiration, pupil diameter, blood pressure, pulse rate, muscle twitching, and penile erection. At this point, the double is in full control of the body and produces vivid dreams, colorful and uninhibited dreams. It is probably during this period that the psychic events take place, such as premonitory visions, out-of-body travel, and other wave function paradoxes. REM sleep lasts about 15 to 20 minutes. After that, the individual returns to SW sleep. REM sleep gradually occurs more often during the night and on the average takes up about 25% of adult sleep time. The REM dreams are more imaginative and introspective and can explore all of the forbidden dimensions of the universe. Night terrors are usually associated with stage 3 or 4 of the SW sleep. The person will suddenly wake with shortness of breath, palpitations, and nervousness. This seems to result from different interactions between the IPN of the double and that of the visible body, as the latter tries to come out from under the dominance of the double. Or it may be the result from encounters with foreign or parasitic WIMP entities that roam the world. This creates a dream's hallucinations as the individual tries to come out of sleep, or tries to throw away the empowerment of an alien entity. Nightmares are described in correlation with REM sleep and seem less intense than night terrors. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder that illustrates dramatically the interaction between the body and the someto. It is manifested as cataplexy, sleep paralysis, or dream hallucinations. Cataplexy is a sudden loss or decrease of muscle tone that may be partial or generalized. It is an abrupt takeover by the individual's shadow double. It seizes the dominance without slow progression of SW sleep. This is probably the result of an abnormality in the chemical system responsible for waking state and the arousal, namely the catecholamine and the acetylcholine, located in the locus coeruleus or the locus subcoeruleus nuclei of the brain. Sleep paralysis is different, in the sense that it occurs while the individual is already asleep, falling asleep, or coming out of sleep. Also, there are different degrees of sleep paralysis. Hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations are vivid, visual, and auditory dreams, dream-like states that occur while going into sleep or while being aroused. Both SW and REM systems are involved in narcolepsy. Sleepwalking is associated with stages 3 and 4 of SW sleep. It is manifested as the aimless wandering, usually without falls. It is a composite state, a paradoxical situation in which the physical body overcomes the hypnoticity of sleep. Although SW sleep is less hypnotic than REM, But the impulse to stand up and walk comes from the shadow clone or the double. It is like self-possession or possession by one's own Sumito. Thus, in dreams, hypnosis, sleepwalking, and night terrors, we seem to be dealing with a dominant or runaway Semitic component. Dr. Bigu, in Psychiatric Simplified, underscores the analogies between possession and hypnotism. He mentions the fact that in times past, before the 18th century, hypnotism was considered a manifestation of occult supernatural power. But with the advances in medical knowledge, the subject has been demystified and now taught in medical school along with the natural sciences. He hopes the same will occur with the alternative reality of the Voodoo. A subject under hypnosis can manipulate fire without any signs of burns. An opening of the belly can be performed in a painless manner. A hemorrhage can be stopped without medical surgical technique. Second degree burns can be produced by stating the individual that he is in contact with a very hot object. The hypnotist can create an appearance of a cadaver by suggesting the subject that he has, the hypnotist can create the appearance of a cadaver by suggesting to the subject that he is a dead person. When it comes to the ESP phenomenon observed by the Voodoo trance, Bigot thinks that a great power of intuition is at work, particularly in clairvoyance. He sees a connection between the psychiatric fields of Voodoo trance and those developed by yoga techniques. However, what the yogi or the adepts of Eastern religion see as a manifestation of the supernatural or the astral or spiritual body of the individual, Bigot is trying to see as a power of intuition. Bigot does not accept the existence of occultism or sorcery. For him, sorcery is only a ploy or shenanigan used by the Hongun or the seers to conceal the use of natural procedures in order to hold sway and power over the members of their society. This is an oversimplified approach to a complex universe in which we are relentlessly discovering new dimensions decade after decade. The evidence or existence of dark matter, WIMP, with the properties hitherto assigned to ghosts and or spirits, opens up new vistas for the researchers and brings us to a new paradox, that of the physical nature of some aspect of our spiritual dimension. But this is a new concept of the physical nature derived from quantum physics and its attendant in new metaphysics. The crisis of possession in itself is a reversal of the structure of the tripartite composite of man. The IPN of the body and the soul of the individual is overtaken by a foreign entity. The mechanism is similar to that of dreams in the sense that the awareness systems of the person retreat, sink below the surface, leaving the leading role of the invading entity. In dreams, the individual's own double takes control, whereas in possession or adorcism, the foreign invading force overwhelms the identity of the devotee or adept. Here, we must re-emphasize that the lower or Vodun is not a metaphysical entity in the old acceptance of the term. Metaphysics is no longer a view of the mind, a product of the imagination. Metaphysics and spirituality refer to a heretofore unknown aspect of the physical realm, the world of invisible matter, the universe of WIMPs and axions. So far, the only exception to that new definition is the nature of God, or Yahweh, who belongs to an entirely different dimension, that of eternity. Eternity is that dimension which has no beginning, no end, no change, and is inhabited by one person, the eternal God. It is the opposite of space-time that has a beginning and will have an end, and that end being the return to its source. Yahweh, the essence of existence, the liberation from birth, death, rebirth, re-death, and the attainment of immortality is in the heavenly paradise. Thus, everything in space-time or universe has a physical existence, be it energy, force, particles, fermions, bosons, axions, voduns, loa, souls, spirit, atoms, molecules, inorganic matter, organic matter, organisms, plants, animals, or humans. All these entities can exist as visible or invisible physical substances and have a dual nature or exist in those two planes at the exact same time, or translate one to another. And the lower are referred to as a force by the Vodou pundits and the initiates. They are real, physical, invisible forces having a dual nature and a wave particle nature, energy and axion physical entities. Henceforth, the materialistic dreams of the scientists like Unveil and Voodoo have finally come true. But that alternate reality is queerer or more odd than they may suppose. And this concludes our reading of the Vodou quantum universe today. We have explored and unpacked a lot of information as it relates to the nature of possession and the multiple or the interdimensional nature of the human body as a gateway for multiple entities. As we see, we have perused multiple scientific research or findings or hypothesis as it relates to the nature of possession. And as we currently stand, it is more commonly understood that the nature of possession is an actual legitimate experience as the mental gateway and the change in the mental association or use of the mental facets of the mind allow for the source energy within one's own self to create change, or to even allow what one would consider a foreign soul energy to create change within. Whatever the case may be, the legitimacy of possession and the interdimensional nature of our universe and ourselves is being further understood. I am your reader, Ahmad Brown, aka Pharaoh Brown, and this is We Meditate. Wholeness, everyone.